those COUNTIF, SUMIF, AVERAGEIF things that we just did, you can do the same thing with a pivot table.
How did you get all this biomass, coal, gas, hydro, everything like we talked about?
I dragged fuel to columns. So you see the fuel one here, I dragged that in the columns field.
So the columns field is your, basically your x-axis and the rows your y-axis, where if I were to create something visual.
Exactly. It's like what you want your column headings to be, are the ones that are in that field.
Yeah.
How do you use filters?
Filters. So if I go to data,
You close the little black box.
as long as I can't do it in that. If I go
Ever
on
close
this one, filter, then I can filter by company, by fuel, things like that. Like, all it's gonna call things like that.
So
That makes sense?
I'm struggling to get that sorting thing back once I close it. Same question she had.
Right, so right click, and there should be something that says show field list. If you right click on the pivot table. Is there a, is that working for you?
I have field settings and pivot table options, but neither of them are.
Okay, cancel that. Okay, cancel that. So go to, or she's go to pivot table. Builder, I think is going to be it.
Good.
Wait, I
What
have
was
a
that?
question.
It was build. It was pivot table. And
How did you get the average, like how did you get the thing in the values thing?
How I change the sum to average, you mean?
Yeah. There's nothing in mine. How did
Oh, so you need something in values. So I'll take this away. So now I'm just got a blank one. And now I take capacity and I drag that into the values range. And now it's giving me the sum of that capacity.
Gotcha.
Whoa.
that's cool.
Yes, that is.
This
is what computers go back to do.
Oh, and you can change, you wanted to change it and have it be
Just make it
average
like a little
capacity?
easier.
Right. So I click on this little left arrow and I go to field settings.
Sorry, if I go
And then I can choose whatever I want.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you just define really quickly what
Different.
the four quadrants of this thing mean?
Right. So columns is what my column headers, what I want my column headers to be. So I have fuel in columns, and so my column headers are all the different types of fuels that I have in this table. Row is the same thing, but on the rows, so it's these locations, so it's all the different countries that I have. Values
So let me just repeat that.
is what's actually populating that number. So what now I'm showing, I have capacity in there, so it's showing me the sum of the capacity. So filter, if I took installation year and I drag that in filter, then now I have this little dealy thing on top, and I can say, okay, only show me ones that are in the year 2011. And so now it's only showing me what is there in 2011. I can change that to like 19.
Is the sum of capacity a different column in that giant table?
No, the sum of capacity, well, yes it is. There's capacity. And so when I put a value into the values thing, it needs to do something to it. It can't just be the value, it has to be some operation on it. And the default operation is sum. And I can change it from being sum with the field settings.
So you're summing the value of each field type by country,
Yes, by installation here in this case.
by capacity of each field type by country.
Exactly.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't know where mine went.
Is there a way to get rid of it? You accidentally get two value bars on there?
Yeah, you can just drag it.
How do you delete
Oh, I
it?
found it.
Oh.
You delete it from the table just by hiding all the cells and pressing delete.
Doesn't work. But that's okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on and leave you guys to figure out pivot tables on your own. So the next thing that we have is charts. So you guys have probably made charts in Excel before, but the way that you do it, so this is the same data, but I've already categorized it by fuel and by year. And actually, here's a good example of how you actually use this stuff in practice. So I had this long data that was for each individual company and plants, like what the capacity is. But I wanted to summarize it without using a pivot table with some ifs. Instead, I created this thing, which is basically the same thing as what we just made with this pivot table, but made it with formulas instead. So I did this sum ifs function that said So this is the capacity row from the other table. This is the year. This is the year I'm selecting, and this is the fuel. So I'm saying from that big giant table, sum the capacity of the ones that have this year and this fuel. So it's like how you make a pivot, like the same type of summary thing without a pivot table with formulas instead. So if I want to make a chart of this data to show how different fuels in the UK were installed over time, then I highlight all the data including the column headers, and I go to Insert Chart, and I want to make an area chart. And sorry if you're using an older version of Excel, they just kind of updated these things. I'm still getting used to it. But so let's make this kind of chart. And so now it's showing me, it's color coded so I see what each segment is. So I'm seeing like how much coal there is, how much gas there is, all that stuff. And so that's like how you make a basic chart. You can change like the different chart options to make like a pie chart or a bar chart or a connection. I'm sure you guys have done this before. But one thing here is that while Excel is not a visualization tool, you can do some really basic stuff to make it look a little better. So for example, if you go into like, if you highlight one of these things, you hit Control 1 or Command 1. That's not what I want at all. If I go to Format Data Series, oh, I don't like this at all. This is new with this version of Excel. But I get all these options of like what I want the fill and border to look like. And so I already kind of went through and made this version go from like something like this to something like this, and you can see it like looks a little bit nicer. And then for those of you who are like designers, you could go and import that into like Adobe Illustrator and make it nice, but I'm not a designer, so I usually don't do that.
How did you get from that row of numbers 1 through 48 to years?
Sorry, say again?
So on this initial chart, you just highlight everything in
Oh, I
this
see,
chart, you
right.
get your x-axis is 1 through 48, I don't even know what that's representing.
Right. So the so what's happening here is when I selected this data, it didn't know that I wanted year to be my x-axis. It just thought that it was a row of data, and so this 1 to 48 is just numbering off the data. So to fix that, then I can go to Select Data, and so now it's kind of, so this interface is I'm telling it how to set up the chart. And so the horizontal category over here where it has 1 through 48, I would like this to be the year. But instead the year is showing up over here as a series of data with all of the other, with all the fuels. So if I can take this out, I can just remove the year. And then here I can edit the horizontal category and just highlight all of the years. And now I click OK, and now I've got years down here. Cool. So that's charts.
Is there a way to select all of the things in the graph?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. Yeah. Yeah, no. That is one of the annoying things. Again, is like if you're editing like the width of a thing or something, you need to do for each one. It's super annoying. Excel doesn't have a bunch of idiosyncrasies. Cool. So now we're going to talk about reference functions, and this is the VLOOKUP thing that I talked about earlier. And this is kind of the second category of like the core set of functions in Excel. The first category being like the basic summary ones. So first we're going to talk about match. And so what match does is it looks for you give it a value, and it looks for that value in a range of data. So here's the alphabet. And I want to know what letter of the alphabet J is. And so I type in match, and I give it a lookup value. So the lookup in this case is going to be J, because I'm looking for the letter J. And then I give it a lookup array, so I'm telling it what range to look in. And so I'm highlighting the alphabet, and then I'm doing comma again. And for match type, I'll tell you why in a second, but I'm entering 0. And so it's giving me 10. And so what it's really saying is that in this range of data, the entry that I gave to look for, J, is the 10th one from the top. So if I look at here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, what it's saying is it's looking in that long list of data and finding the one that I asked it for and telling me what order it was in the range. Does that make sense? Okay, so the reason that I entered 0, this is one of the things that I hate the most about Excel, which is that by default, match is looking for an approximate match and not an absolute match. So if you have like a long list of addresses and you've got like Washington Street and Washington Boulevard or something like that, and you put in, you say look for an approximate match, you might get the wrong one. And frequently it does. And so by entering 0, I'm telling it to ignore that and to look for an exact match instead of an absolute match. You don't really need to know that, you just need to know that anytime you do a match function, enter 0. Or else you'll get the wrong number.
What do you get if you don't?
In this case, we might still get 10 because all those letters are pretty different. But let's see, yeah, still 10. But if they were like longer strings of text that were more similar, then it would just find the wrong thing. Like it would find the first approximate match and say that was an
It
absolute
won't
match.
give you the list of potential matches?
No. So like here, actually here, that's a good point. So let's say that I put, if I replace the C with a J, and I put 0 down here, so now I have 3. So it doesn't know that there's 2 J's in this string of data. It just knows that it finds a J at number 3, and then it stops looking. So that's one of the things you need to be careful. You only look here when you're looking for when there's one exact match. Okay, so the VLOOKUP kind of builds on the match, but then instead of just finding that match and telling you where in the range of data it was, it uses that match that it finds as a reference point to return a different value. So let's say that I want to know the population of California. From this is the same about the Romney election table stuff. So I'll do VLOOKUP, and I want to know, I'm going to do California. I'll tell you what this means in a second. Then I'll select the table of everything. And then I'm going to tell it how many columns to go, and I'm going to do 0. So it's returning me the population of California. And so what it's doing is, I'm telling it, it's basically starting with a match. VLOOKUP always starts with the left-hand column. So I'm saying in this left-hand column that I've selected, look for California. So it's going down here, and it's finding California, and so when it finds California, it stops. And then I'm telling it that I want it to return that row in the 3rd column of this data source. And so it's found California, and so the column index number that I've entered is 3. So it's taking that row in the 3rd column of the data, and it's finding this 37 million figure. And then the 0 is the same thing as the match, just enter 0, go look for an approximate match. So that 37 million is showing 37 million. 2 easy ways to screw up a VLOOKUP function are first, it will only look for a match in the first row of the data. So if I drag this little thing over here to include this blank column over here, then it's not going to find anything. Because even though California is still covered in this range, it's only looking in this first column for the match, and then it's looking over. The second way to screw it up is if I don't include the column that I want it to arrive on in the range of data. So if I drag this over to only include the states and the election winner, but I ask it to return the population, which isn't part of the data I've selected, then it won't find it, because I'm asking it to go 3 columns over, but I've only selected 2 columns. So those are the 2 easy ways to screw VLOOKUP up.
What is the 3 is the column that you search, is the number of columns to the right of the first one?
Not the number of columns to the right of it, but the 3rd column in the data range, so including it, yeah.
And what's the 0?
The 0 is the same thing as the match, because by default it's looking for an approximate match. So just enter 0 to tell it to look for a perfect match.
Why are you looking 3 columns over?
Because in this particular example, what I want to know is the population of California.
Oh.
So just like I'm telling it to go to California, because I want to know the population, I'm saying to go over 3. If I want to know the area of California instead, I would say do 4 columns, and it would return whatever the square mileage of California is.
If you have like a really long set and you don't want to count over, is there a way to?
You can do a different function. We'll talk about an offset match in a minute, which might help, but you just have to do a lot of columns. Cool. And we're talking about offset matches now. So offset is kind of the next level up above match VLOOKUP. And the way that it works, I guess the easiest way is to show you an example. So I do offset. And so the first thing it asks for is a reference, which is basically a start point. So I'm gonna click on this start cell. And then it wants to know how many rows down that I want it to go, and then how many rows across. And it's always gonna go down and to the right. So there's no up and to the left. So if I want it to go 2 rows down and 3 rows across, then I'll enter 2 and 3. And it's gonna return to R3C because it went 2 rows down and 3 rows across.
What do you do if you want to find something above?
You use a different formula, or you rearrange your data so that you're starting above or so you're starting to the top, to the right, top to the left of the point you want to get to.
What's a practical application of?
I'll show you. So let's say that we have this store data again, and we have the for each day of the week and for each hour of the day, and then we have how much money the store made. And so we're going to set a thing up. We want to know on Wednesday, in the hour starting at 2 p.m., how much money did it make. And we're going to we could obviously just look at the table, but if we had like a whole bunch of data or something like that, then it might be a little bit to do that, so we're going to do a match offset. So we're going to do offset. We're going to start at the start point again. And then, so I guess I'll start with this one just by saying if we went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 3 to the right, then I'm going to get 118, right? And so, but instead of having to look up where 2 p.m. is here or Wednesday is here, I can use a match function to tell me that. Because this 7, where I'm telling it to find 2 p.m., that's the same thing as the match function, right? We're just finding where 2 p.m. is on the list. So if I take away that 7, and I type in match, and then I click on this 2 p.m. thing here, I highlight this range of data, and I do 0, then it's the same thing, and I can do the same thing with Wednesday. So match Wednesday, 118. And then this is a little model now, so I can change this around so I can do 4 p.m. And it's going to give me the 165. I can make this a Tuesday, and it's going to give me that number. So the match offset is used to like summarize a big chunk of data, and it's like one of those things that you don't really realize that you need until you're trying to do a very specific thing with a workbook, and you realize, oh yeah, you can do this with an offset function.
Can you walk through that formula again real quick?
Yes. So the offset. So let's start by boiling this down. So I'll resolve these down with F9. So down to what they resolve to. And so I'm saying I'm starting at cell S4. And then I want it to go 9 rows down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 4 p.m. and 2 rows across. So 1, 2, until it gets to 186. And once returned 186. So that's basically what it's doing. But I'm taking that 9 and that 2, and I'm replacing it with a formula that will result in a 9 or a 2. And so with this match, that's going to result in a 9. What I'm saying is, in this range of data, find 4 p.m. And 4 p.m. is the 9th entry in that row of data. So instead of me just telling it to go down 9 rows, then I'm putting in the formula that's going to tell that for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on offset so far? Alright, so the one other thing the offset can do is it can return a range. So you see down here with these little data fields that it also has height and width. And so if it's in brackets, it's an optional data range. I don't need to put it in, and I haven't been for the previous examples. But for this one, I will. Say that I want to know the sum of what the store is making between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. Then I can say offsets, and I'll do so 2. Okay, so the offset match down to match to 4, so it's going to return match to Tuesday, so it's going to return 155. But then I'll put in a height of 2, or a height of 3 rather, and a width of 1. So it's going to look for, it's going to take the point that it returns as the start points, and then go down and across from there, however many I tell it to. And so if I hit enter here, it's going to be an error, because I'm basically referencing multiple cells. But I could sum these, and now I'm just summing a range really. And the reason that's doing that is so if I resolve this within the sum, then it's returning 155.67.96, which is, it's finding that 155 that I've asked for, and then I said give me a height of 3 and a width of 1. So it's going 155, 167, 186. And then so those are the 3 values that it's returning, and I'm telling it to sum those 3 values. So it's
So
giving me
the 1 we need to go over 1.
No, that's just the width. So it's the width of the box. And so for example, if I had done a width of 0, it'd be an error because you can't have a width of 0 cells. So by default, I guess like you can think of it as offset has a default height and width of 1.
If you had said 2 would have summed the 6 that are there.
Cool. Okay. Next is text functions. And these are functions that are meant to deal with text data. So the first one of those is just the length function, which is called the len function, so len. And all this does is it tells you how many characters are in a string of data, and this could be text or numeric data. So we have abracadabra here, so we just do len, highlight the abracadabra, and it says that there's 12 characters in abracadabra. And then we can do that down here, so len, Excel is 5, MIT, and so it works on numeric data as well. Next is the left and right functions. And so what those are doing is it's returning the leftmost or rightmost characters in a string of data, and you specify how many left or rightmost characters you want. So for example here, I'm saying give me the leftmost character of Massachusetts, but only give me 1, and so it's returning an M. But if I replace that 1 with a 5, then it's returning Massey. Same thing with right, so there's the 5 is sets. And so one way that you can use that is, so now you have this like city-state data, but it's coming in with a city and a state combined. And say that I want to separate out the state from that city data, then I can do right, highlight this, and 2, is just the 2-letter abbreviation. And now I have the states of each of those city-states. The next level on top of that is the mid function, which is basically the left function, but instead of starting at the first character in the string, you're telling it where in the string to start looking. So for example, I've got this string that says A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I want it to give me, so I say mid, so I give it the text that's going to reference, and then I say that I want you to start looking at the third character, and I want you to give me 2 characters. And so it's going to give me C and D. It's going to start looking at the third, and it's going to give me 2. And one way that you could use that is say that you copied a bunch of data off the internet, and it's a bunch of cities, but it has these weird underscores in front. You don't want to get rid of those. You could just find and replace the underscores or get rid of them. But another thing you can do is you can do mid and highlight the text and say I want to start at character 2. And then I'm just going to say 100 because it's not actually going to give me 100 characters. It's going to give me either 100 or a stop when it reaches the end of the string. So it'll give me all the names that have the underscores. And then the next level up is find. And find is kind of the reverse of the mid function, where instead of telling it to return a string based on the location, or return a substring within the location of a bigger string, I'm telling it to find a substring within a bigger string. So if I have like the text that says Massachusetts, and I want to find Chew, so I find Chew within Massachusetts, and start number by default is 1, then 6. So Chew starts at the 6th character within Massachusetts. So one way that you can use this for the same data is you could get just the city. So one way to look at this is if I could get this to return all the characters in this data string up to the comma, then I would have just the city. So the way that I'll do that, first I'm going to find the comma. So I'll do find comma, within that text. And so it's the 10th one in Cambridge, and it's like 7899. So then what I can do is I can work that into a left function. So if I do left, and I highlight this, and I've already got the location of the comma, and I close that, then it's giving me Cambridge with a comma, Dallas with a comma, and all of that. So then if I go back into the left function, and I have this find that says 10, I know this says 10, and I subtract 1 from it, so that's just saying 9. Then it's going to be Cambridge without a comma.
Whoa.
What?
We're allowed to do that? Whoa.
I actually encourage
Okay, awesome.
So yeah, when you loop together these different text functions, then they can do pretty cool or really useful things. It saves you a lot of time. I'm sure you've all been in a situation where you're trying to clean a bunch of address data and it sucks. And so these things can help a little bit, but it still sucks.
How did you create that second column super fast?
This one?
Yeah.
That was just because these used to be merged, but then when I copied down the data, I guess they unmerged. So
Oh.
that wasn't actually supposed to
That
happen.
was like a cool trick.
Look
Yeah.
really fancy.
It does look really
It's
fancy.
more of a mistake. Okay, and so concatenation, this is the thing that I mentioned earlier with the ampersand. And so what this does is concatenate means just like stick two things together. So there's two ways to do it. One is with the concatenate function, and the other is just with the ampersand. The ampersand way is a little bit easier. But they do the same thing. So if I do equals abra ampersand cadabra, then it's going to return abracadabra. Same thing if I had done concatenates abracadabra. I can also add in special things into that. So if I want there to be a space between abra and cadabra, I can do abra. Well, I'll say that again. So abra, and now I'm going to insert a text string inside quotes. So parentheses space parentheses. So that's like a second text block. Ampersand again cadabra. Then it's going to give me abra space cadabra. And so the way that you would use that is then say that we have city and state, but we want to make it into like a city comma state, then we can just do equals Cambridge and comma space and quotes and mass. Now I have Cambridge mass. And I copied that down.
You didn't comma space at all.
No, yeah, so it's comma space, and you put anything you want within the blocks, and it'll come through as like a little text series.
Can it do regular expressions?
Like what?
Like, you know, like looking for, like, say, looking for different types of matches, or looking for like anything that's like something in a certain set of characters and things like that.
Like, give me an example.
Like, say you wanted to look for something that's the first half of the alphabet in lowercase.
Ooh, that'd be rough. The short answer is no. You could do it, but it would have to be like a big nested if
Right,
statement
it's
that had
not-
like 30 things in it. But yeah, there's no easy way to do that.
Okay. I was so impressed that I was like not expecting it to like have like a whole Perl built into it or something, but okay.
Okay, so those are text functions. And then so I mentioned that you could use that to clean address data. So here's a bunch of address data. This is from the property owners database in Cambridge. It's from a project that I did last spring. And anyone that's ever cleaned address data is like getting heart palpitations right now because like this is the worst thing in the world to do. So just like looking at this database, I can see what an absolute mess it is. Like some of these zip codes, like this is supposed to be 02154, but the first 0 got kicked out, so I thought that it was a number and I dropped the 0. There's Suite B in here and Unit 107 over here. This says road and ave, but I know that further down there's going to be a R-O-A-D instead of R-O-D and an avenue instead of an ave. This street doesn't have a period, this street does have a period. This says Massachusetts Ave, there's going to be a lot that say Mass Ave. If I look down further, they're going to be something just say C-A and B instead of Cambridge. Like it's like a big, hairy, messy data set, and it sucks to clean because if you want to like import it into GIF or something like that, then you need to get it into a consistent format. I know there's like Google has like a way of doing this too, but you can do some things in Excel. So we're not actually going to go through and do that because that would still take a few hours. But just like some of the ways that you could help to fix this with like some of the things we've talked about so far are like you could filter the data. You could look for the misspellings of Cambridge. So I see like Cambridge with no I, with a comma, things like that. I could find the ones that are numeric and not numeric, and I could add a 0 back into those with concatenation. I can find all of, well, I guess I would find and replace all of the I guess all the blank STs and replace them with blank streets. And then like, I might want to separate out the numbers into a different row than the letters. So like, I would go for like, I'd find the first space and separate the columns before and maybe the characters before and the characters after. So I'd do like 80 and then Wendell Street.
Wait, can you do that?
Yes. So if I do look for a period in here, then I have 3. I'll also bring that over to this side. So I have find 3, and then so I'll have like number, name. Then I'll do lefts, Wendell Streets.
What was the find 3? What did you?
Oh, sorry. I was finding the first space in the string. So I'm finding the character after the 80, and then so I'll do left and give me that, and I'll subtract 1 because I don't want to include the period.
You mean space.
Or the space, sorry. Yeah. So it's giving me 80, and if I bring these down, then it's giving me like all the other numbers, and then I can also do right or mid, I guess. So mid. This starts 3 plus 1 because I want to start the one after the space.
What is mid?
Mid is the one, it's the left, but you're not starting at the first character, you're starting somewhere in the middle of the string. And the number of characters, I'll say 200. So there at Wendell Street, no. Yeah, what I do. And so now I have like a column with the number and a column with the name. And so that's like a first cut at it. And unfortunately, like even with these text functions, it's still like a very long and iterative process. So, like what you would do is you like fix the obvious errors, then you would try and like geocode it and see how many hits you got. Then you would look at the ones that don't hit and try and find a common error in a lot of them. Then you would go fix that and you would try again. It definitely doesn't make cleaning data like easy, but it makes it easier than just like kind of randomly sorting through it.
Can you explain the zip code? So,
Right.
I looked in the format and it says they're all general.
Right, so the format, this is, so Excel treats numeric and text data differently, and that's not the same as how it displays it. So the format here is just telling me how it's displaying the data. It's not telling me whether it actually is a number or a text. So if I do that thing we talked about earlier, so if there's a function called isNumber, and so if I look at the zip code there, then you see the ones that say true or the ones that only have 4. So what I could do here is I could say equals if isNumber. So if it is a number, then I want 0 and zip code concatenated. And if not, I just want the zip code. And so that's how you fix the zip code one. Does that make sense to you?
But then now you put a 0 in front of the 4 one. But that's okay.
Sorry, you remember which one?
Summersville, Kentucky.
Oh, you're right. Okay, so I guess that then I would fix that with if and. So there's and or. So like and is like if it satisfies both of these conditions, or if it satisfies one of these conditions. Then I would say if it isn't a number and length M4 not equal 5. Did that work now? Well, there's a way to fix it, but
Okay.
yeah. Anyways, that's the sort of thing that you would do.
Is it, sorry, one quick question. Is there a way to keep the 0 before the number and keep it a number? Because it always sort of erases that, right?
I don't think so. I think that it would have to, because if it's a number, I don't think you could get it to display that.
I might have missed it, but why does 0 make it nothing here?
So sometimes zip code data, you want zip codes to be read in as text instead of a number. But sometimes it gets written as a number, and so like this zip code here is supposed to be 02140, but because it thinks it's a number, then it's gonna get rid of that first 0 because that's how it treats numbers. And so it's displaying this as zip code 2140. And so we want to fix that.
So what happens in states where it's like they don't start at 0?
Then this is less a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, this particular thing is only a bug for states that start with 0, which includes Massachusetts, unfortunately.
Brian, how do you get the little triangle sort tabs down if they're not already on here?
Right, that is in data filter.
Okay.
We can talk about those on and off. Cool. Alright, so let's go to automated data tools. So this is kind of like outside of functions, there's a couple other things that Excel does that are really cool. The first one of these is going to be text to columns. And so let's say that I copied and pasted a bunch of data from the internet into Excel, and this is still that like Obama Romney data, but it's coming through looking like this. Like it didn't preserve the fact that these are supposed to be in different columns. Excel's way of doing this, if you go to data and text to columns, and I choose delimited, I can tell it to look for a space and to change those texts into separate columns at each space. This will finish. Yes. And so now it's giving me that text in each column.
Can you just do that one more time?
Yes. So it's data, text to columns, and I'm going to choose delimited instead of fixed width. If I chose fixed width, then I could choose like on the 3rd character, on the 7th character, on the 10th character, that sort of thing. But with delimited instead, I'm looking for find this character and split it there. So if you're working with comma separated values in CSV format or text separated or space separated, like that's what you would do. And so here I'm telling it to look for a space. If I didn't select space and I chose a semicolon or something like that, then it wouldn't find anything because there's none in there. But with space, then it's finding that and showing me that those are going to be different columns.
Do you want to keep the tab up there? It was like you chose space and tab.
Oh yeah, that would only matter if there were a tab in the data. So I guess you can take it off.
That's awesome.
Yes, it is. And then so another thing you can do if you have this much easier way of doing the Cambridge, Massachusetts separation thing will be text to columns and just finding that comma. And so this is actually a thing when I brought in that like the world's largest city data. I actually copied that from Wikipedia earlier today, and I realized I had to do this already because I copied it in and it had like the Wikipedia citations next to all of the population data. And so what I did was I went to text to columns and I typed in other. I typed in like the open bracket sign. No, it's not the open bracket sign. That's the open bracket sign. And so cancel the merge cell. And then so it got all of the bracket stuff over there, and I can just delete that and have the population data. So that's text to columns. Remove the duplicates, or remove duplicate is another thing you can do. So you have a string of data, and I'll copy this over to the side. And I'll click on remove duplicates under the data tab. Then it's going to highlight the tab or the range of data that I have selected, and then it's just going to remove all the duplicates, so I have A, B, C, D. So a way you can use that is here's all the sports teams in California. I copy the cities into another row, I remove the duplicates on it, and now I can do count if to see how many teams there are. And I'm going to lock the formulas, so with F4 in each city. So that's how many sports teams there are in all cities in Los Angeles. Cool. Next thing is importing and exporting data. So Excel gets used a lot with other software types. You probably already started using with GIS. If you haven't, then you're going to start soon. I use SAS a lot. Those of you that are taking stats next semester will be using it with data. Anyone that does any database and works and uses with Access and a number of other things just use Excel files a lot. And there's just a couple things to keep in mind with importing and exporting it. So first thing is how to bring in an Access table. I think I sent around that Access database file. Don't worry about opening it for getting it if you don't have it already. But the way that you do that is under the data tab, there's a from access button. So I'll click that, and I'm gonna go find where I saved that access file on my computer. So address is in Excel, open it. It's gonna ask which sheet, so that one. And I want to open that up as a table in a new worksheet. And so here's my address data that was in Access earlier, and now it's in Excel. One thing to keep in mind is that this looks a little bit different than what we've been doing. This because this is called an Excel table. An Excel table is kind of a confusing name, but it's a special type of thing where it's actually stored as a relational database. So if I were to type in left, well actually first of all, so if I were to just say equals and start going across here, then you're seeing that it's not actually showing me what's entered in the cell. It's showing me the name of the row. So if I were to do equals left in the 3 leftmost bins of the city, then it's going to copy that all the way down, because in a relational database, everything needs, or I guess relational database is the right word, but in a database of this type, then everything needs to have the same operation in a row. Probably I guess that's what an Excel table does. A lot of things that work with Excel will export as either a CSV, a text, or a DBF file, like the data in a shape file is a DBF file. And Excel can read all of those, but then you can save it as an XLS file. So like if you want to open up one of the data from one of your shape files, you can just open and navigate to the DBF file and open it, and you probably already know that already, or if not, maybe we'll show you how to do that very shortly. Exporting data from Excel to other programs, including GIS. If you haven't already started working with that already, then there's a few things to keep in mind. Generally, you want to have structure as a flat file, and what a flat file means is that it's just like one giant table. Like column A or row cell A1 is the first header name, and like all of cell or all row A is headers, and then everything down there is data. So like for example, like this is a flat file because there's no junk around the sides. It's just like the table is all that's there. And so that's usually the only thing that most software programs can import. You want to be careful there's no like random cells floating around. You want to make sure that if that's supposed to be numeric, there's not any text data in it, like NA or anything like that, or else it's going to think it's text data. Don't include spaces or special characters in column names. It's true for GIS. And be aware that some things like GIS can have a limit on the number of characters that can go into it. So if you're in the column heading, so if you're have like a heading that says like income in 2000, then GIS won't include the entire header that says income in 2000. We'll cut it off somewhere. And it's usually easier if you get rid of any formulas before importing it anywhere. Next thing is printing. If you want to print an Excel file, so let's look at this guy, this Excel table thing we looked at. We went to page layouts, and we looked at view page layout. If I go to view page layout, then like if I printed this, it would kind of run off into this thing. So we want the page break preview, then we could drag this over and make it all prints on one page. And so we went back to page layout, and now things are like showing up on one page. Nice. So if you want to run prints in Excel file, let's say do it. Working in large workbooks, I'm not sure how much chance those of you guys will have to do that this year, but if you like ever again, it's like model building and things like that. There's a few things to keep in mind. One is that you also want to keep track of your data sources. So like if you're working in like a 15 megabyte file and there's like all these different things in there, you're going to forget what things are. So ideally, anytime you make an Excel workbook, every data points will either be a formula that's attached to its source, or will have noted somewhere what its source is, because if you don't do that, then you'll lose track of it, which is bad. You can also leave sources in comments if you hit Shift F2, which I guess is Shift Fn F2 on this keyboard. Then you can like leave a comment, and there's a little red square there, and so I can like see what the comment was. You want to keep your raw data and your formulas separate, and you want to try and like keep your raw data untouched. So if you say that I was working with like some government database that gets updated every month, and I just kind of copied a bunch of data into Excel, then I want to keep the frame of that data the way it was. So I'll do a bunch of formulas on that data, but I won't touch the data. So that next month, when the government puts out that new data set, I can just copy it and paste it in and all of my formulas will still be working and they'll be touching like, the new data. And, so it's best to, yes.
On that concept, what do you do when you're trying to link, you're creating a formula on sheet 1, but you're using data on sheet 2? Do you just flip to sheet 2 and highlight that cell and it automatically knows what you're talking about in sheet 1?
Right, so let's do that right now. So let's, in this sheet, I'm going to type in like 1, 2, 3. And so here, I'm going to do 1 plus 2 plus 3. Or wait, that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about if I took like a setup on one sheet and transferred it to another sheet?
No, I think what you're doing, like
Okay.
creating formulas in one sheet that use data and numbers from other sheets.
Right, so that's what this is doing here. So within the single quotes, it's finding the sheet name, so 17 importing and exporting. If kind of a weird thing about Excel is if there weren't any spaces in the sheet name, then these quotes wouldn't be there, but it'd still be doing the same thing. The quotes are just like how it manages having spaces in the data. And then the exclamation point separates the sheet name from the cell. So this is like this sheet, cell L22, plus this sheet, cell L23, plus L24.
And when you're typing it in, all you have to do is just click over.
So what was but is there a manual for that, or do you just have to remember the formula?
Oh, you don't need to at all. So like here all I'm doing is clicking onto the sheet.
Oh,
and
okay,
like,
so you can,
like this
yeah,
plus
back and
this.
forth.
Yeah, and so it's doing it automatically.
And you can lock things, like all the functions work, or like if I wanted to lock a number on sheet 2 in my data, I can use it in sheet 1, that sort of stuff.
Other things to keep in mind when you're working in long workbooks are that indexes can help. You may have noticed in the first sheets of this guy, I have a little index thing. You do these with hyperlinks, so like, and it's also Control K, so I can like link to somewhere in this document, so like basic formatting tips. But so if I go back to working in large workbooks, I'm back here. Just like if you're working with a lot of workbooks, that's helpful. You can link between workbooks. So if I open up a new workbook, which I think I already did actually, but if I can link to there, so now I have like a link that attaches to that. Then you can manage the workbooks that you're linking to under data in edit links. So there's that workbook I just linked to, and I can like see that. I can change that if I wanted to. The access database I connected to under connections. So there's the access database. You can. I'm not going to talk about this thing. Learn the indirect function if you start like doing really cool Excel stuff, but that's like a complicated thing. But if you want to really get into Excel, learn indirect. I'll show trace dependence in a second, and also you can protect a sheet if you want to. If you're handing it off to a client, you can a bunch of stuff, you don't want them to fuck it up, then you can go to, I forget where it is, but there's somewhere here it has, protect sheet. Yeah, so I could like protect the workbook and put a password in, and someone need a password to open the workbook, or not to open the workbook, but to change anything in the workbook. And so here is kind of like a simple model. And so I used to work for this energy efficiency consulting firm, so this is a cost effectiveness analysis of energy efficient lighting. And so it's like the way that I have this thing set up, like normally it would be a lot bigger. But you can see I've got my inputs separate from my calculations, I've got my outputs over here. It's clear what my inputs are. All my inputs have a source. I have comments to myself about what things are. If I were to get new avoided cost data, which is what this is, I can just plug it in and everything would be updated. It's like when you start out building something like a model, just give a little bit of thought as to how you want to lay things out and how you're going to update it when your data changes, because your data will almost always change. And then also trace, and I have to talk about trace dependence. So if you go to formulas, if you're working on like a big work and you have to forget how everything links together, there's these little buttons, trace dependence and trace precedence. So if I want to know what cells went into this calculation here, I can click that, and we'll draw a little from everything that influenced that cell to where
Did you
it was.
click precedence or dependence?
That was precedence, and then if I click dependence, it would click everywhere that cell goes. So that goes over here.
That's so cool.
Yes, it is.
What?
How do you get rid of it?
Oh, and remove errors is how you get rid of it. Also, error checking. If you're trying to find if there's errors in your data, you can click on error checking, and it'll look for errors. So if I had like So if I have a divide by the 0 error, and I go to error checking, then it'll show me that error, and it'll like ask me what I want to do about that error, so I'll check. Yes.
You mentioned about making it so that you can import new data and all your things are messed up. Would you mind saying again how you, like, what
Sure.
you would have to put in place to do that?
So here I've got like a range of imports. So say that I got like some new data that was like slightly different. So this is like my new raw extract from the client to the government or whatever. Then as long as this is in the same format as how, like the way that I get it is in the same format as how I use it in the model, then I can just copy it and paste it in, and my results will update. I don't need to like worry about relinking everything because it's the same format. Cool. And then last thing I want to show you is macros and Visual Basic. So what I've been showing so far today is just the front end of Excel, and there's also a back end of Excel. And I'm not really going to say anything about this because I don't really know much about it, but I just want you to know that it's there. And so if I click Alt 11, there we go. Okay, so either Alt F11 or Alt FN11, depending on whether it's a Mac keyboard or not, will open up this thing. And this is the Visual Basic interface. And so if I go to Insert Module, and then here's a little code thing that I wrote out. If I copy this in here and I hit run, then it's gonna like give me the message that I told it to run. And so you can do like a bunch of cool things. We had a guy that was a VBA guy at the place that I worked, and like the thing that he would do, like if you wrote out like a bunch of, if like on one sheet you had to type the names of the months, and then you had a template sheet, that he would write some VBA code that would then go create a version of that template sheet that was titled each of the names of the month. Like there's like, basically what macros do is they take a set of manual steps and they create a routine out of them. And so like here's an example of that. Like the other way, so one way of creating a macro is by coding it. The other way is by recording it. And we'll see if this actually works. I don't really know macros, so it might not. But if we go to View, Record Macros, and let's say love it. And I'm gonna set hotkey for this. I'm gonna set it to be Control _L. And so then I want to make my cell pink. And then I want to write and then if I go, and so this whole time it's been recording what I do. And so now I go to stop recording, then that's creating a macro. And what that macro is when I hit Control L, which is what I assigned it to, it's going to repeat all those steps that I just did while I was recording. So if you Control L, it says I love cake because I referenced the cells that left of it. And then I love pie, and then I love Excel, and I love drawing. I guess I lost the. It got lost somewhere along the line, but that's how macros is supposed to work. Cool. And so that's kind of all the stuff that I wanted to go over. Hopefully you guys are not super confused, and at least know like the questions to ask and the types of things that you can do in Excel. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
And how did you get this familiar with Excel?
I knew no Excel when I graduated college. I just knew how to like add two rows together. But then I got a job at a consulting firm, and we just use Excel. And so like the way that I learned it was by like looking at workbooks that other people that I worked with had put together and seeing how they solved problems, and then googling it when I couldn't do it. So it's like an iterative. It's like really like they should teach us in schools, but they don't. So the only way that you're really good at Excel is like on the job training.
That no one wants to do if they want you to know Excel to get hired.
Right.
You always say, oh yeah, I'm kind of familiar.
I have a question. Maybe I just missed it because I wasn't paying attention. But at some point, your sheet was talking about Excel not letting you do greater than or less than something, and then you did something with using like strings.
Right. That was
to do that.
That was ampersand. So that was.
So you're just writing the formula like as a string, and then it determines it. Is that what you're?
Right. So the reason I'm doing that is that that was for hips, I think it was.
Yeah.